Now, as I was studying just war theory, I entered seminary to study theodicy, but that became rather esoteric when my son became involved in the war in Iraq. And so I turned from dealing with what is called theodicy, or the study or a justification for evil in light of a good and just God. I moved from that because I thought this is kind of going around in circles. I need to really pay attention to something that's more concretely evil, and for me, that's war. And I began to think, this is theory, just war is theory. But what about the real lived experiences of soldiers like my son, who is in Iraq at this time? And in order to do that, I decided that I would study about just war in terms of what is the African American or the Pan-African perspective of just war. And tonight we've been hearing a lot about conscientious objection. And I find that very great conversation. But for me, I kept sitting and thinking, it's one thing to talk about conscientious objection, but it's another thing to talk about the context, to talk about one's context. And for African Americans, what about the American conscience? What about the treatment of African Americans as relates to war? And so I began to look at African American just war ideologies and conceptualizations of war. The very first thing that I found out, or that I had to contend with, was how do African Americans look at God in light of war? Some of the songs in the African American church would lead one to believe that African Americans consider God as a God who does in fact engage in war for the protection of God's people. This is this idea, or the Hebrew idea, of the warring God, or that God in the song of the African American church, victory, victory shall be mine, victory, victory shall be mine, if I hold my peace and let the Lord fight my battle. Victory, victory shall be mine. African Americans have engaged in war for several reasons. Their participation in war has been for several reasons. One, because of colonial control. As slaves, they fought also in wars to end, or in their opinion, the war was a way for them to be made free from slavery. And you see that in some of the writings of David Walker, who said that God will tear up the face of the earth through war, because war as a means to set the slaves free. You also see that in the writings of the African Methodist Episcopal bishop by the name of Daniel Payne, who warned African Americans against meddling in the ordained civil war. That is, that war was a way for them to be set free. The Civil War was a way to end slavery. African Americans have also participated in war to prove their humanity. To prove their humanity. If I go to war and shed my blood, America will no longer see me as a black man, or it will no longer see me as an animal, but they will in fact understand that I'm a human being. And at the very same time that Martin Luther King was protesting war, African Americans were signing on to the military. And ultimately, in my research, on the one end of absolute pacifism, on the other end of just war, African Americans have had to contend with this idea that we live in a country that has oppressed them for years and years, and war for them is a way not only to prove their humanity, but as a self-defense against genocide. Thank you.